Welcome everybody to the IRYS demo today. I have got the pleasure of playing MC alongside Margot and Lindsay, the founders of IRYS InsurTech. And you guys, before we get into the demo, which I know is what everybody is waiting for, I really wanted to just kind of take a moment and recognize the fact that we've got over 200 people that are registered to come watch this demo today. And
that's exciting.
Oh, yeah, I know. And just take a second to talk with you guys a little bit about what you're hearing in terms of response to IRYS and out in the market.
Oh, our feedback has been fantastic, which in my opinion kind of just signifies everybody's readiness to sort of embrace new technology. I think we've all been talking about it for years and years, and we've been dipping our toes into it. But it's really exciting to see so much of the distribution channel come together and say yes, we are definitely ready for something new, and we pick you, IRYS. Yeah,
I think you're right. And from the comments and the chatter that I've heard, and especially when you guys did the demo at ITC, there were a lot of cameras coming up, people taking pictures and videos, and a lot of buzz that happened after that. So I'm really excited to see what questions we get and what interaction we have coming into the comments and the chats. Everybody who's joining us live, make sure you pop in, tell us where you're joining from, or at the very least say hello, because that's the whole point of a live. We've got Lisa there ready in the comments already. So I'd love to see other people chiming in there as well. So I guess without further ado, we're going to get going with a demonstration. Because LinkedIn Live's real estate is a little limited, we're going to pull down our cameras and put up Lindsay's screen so that you guys can start going through the demonstration. And then start throwing questions in. We'll make sure that we've got time to address what we can during the live, and anything that we don't get to live during the broadcast after we're done going through the demo, we'll follow up with either direct messages or in the chat itself as well. So like I said, without further ado, give me 1 second while I do the switcheroo.
Okay, what we're looking at here is a dashboard. And we like to call these dashlets, but what they really are individual reports that any of our users can look at to glean information about their day, important things they need to know. But the key thing is they don't need to leave the screen to go run a report or to enact a team to run a report for them so that they have the information they need. It's right here at their fingertips. And depending on what persona they are or persona they play in the agency, we have different dashboards with different KPIs or dashlets. So here, everything is really dynamic. They can hover over these dashlets. It'll give them additional information, again, without having to leave the screen and run a separate report. Everything is very interactive and easy to read. And it's very easy for a user to understand where they are and what they need to do next in their day. We also give the ability to filter the entire dashboard. So if you really wanted to get more granular, you could do that by looking at your team or all the agency or selecting a custom date range. You get the idea of how to filter that down. But it really just takes reporting and makes it really simple for the user. But Lindsay, if we could, I'm going to step into the entity side and just kind of explain what IRYS really is about at its core. It's about our relationship building and how we have people at the center of everything. So we're going to hop into one of our entities here. And the very first thing you see when you come to an entity, and in our case, you can kind of correlate entity with an account, right? So we have business entities and we also have household entities, but we're looking at a business entity here. And we're immediately visualizing this particular cable company and all of the people, policies, businesses, opportunities that might surround this particular entity or this business that we have in our database here. So we can see humans here and their relationships. We can hover and see sort of their roles or the type of relationships that they play here in Smith Cable. We can also filter this down. Linz, I don't know if we want to filter out humans.
We'll take those humans off.
So we can look at the whole universe, or we can go down and just look at the things that we need to see in this view. Again, we have policy info and opportunity, but we also have this idea of pseudonode, which is awesome because the universe is large, right? And our connections should be plenty. So this particular cable company has franchisees, and we are notating that here by letting the user kind of double click into that and then seeing a larger piece of the universe. So we've got multiple policies connected to these multiple franchisees, opportunities that we can set either through IRYS or manually, so that we know exactly sort of what we need to sell these franchisees that work underneath our franchisor. But it's really cool. We also can see things like potential opportunities, and we're going to get into that in a second when we hop over to the AI opportunities. But all in all, the user here can choose an opportunity and put it in their pipeline, and then they're good to go. But we're able to look at what's important is that we're able to see this particular business in a much more dynamic way. And we see them inside of an ecosystem, so we can gauge better sort of what their importance level is and how they're interconnected to other people or other objects in the system. But if you want, Linz, we can hop back to dashboard, and we'll go into our AI opportunities. Let's say that 5 times fast. We go back into AI opportunities, and we'll click on one of the suggested opportunities that IRYS is giving me as a sales rep here. And so we hop in. We're looking at, in this case, a construction company. And if we want to minimize that on the left, perfect. We'll look at some of the suggestions that IRYS is giving us. So because we're open API, and because the entire foundation of IRYS is that we should be able to seamlessly send and receive data through that API, we can do things like pull in third-party data or open source data to help hydrate information about this, in this case, a construction company. So we can do that through many channels. We have partnerships with companies like Fenris or Equifax or LexisNexis. But we can look here at the people that IRYS is suggesting that we need to add to our database that weren't previously there. And we give the user the ability to say yes or no here, because not all of these data sources are 100% accurate all the time. So we do want to have some human interaction. But what IRYS found was actually that one of our CEOs of our companies is actually on the board of directors of a different corporation that we did not have in this database. So IRYS is surfacing that to the sales professional. They have the ability to say, you know what, yes, I do want to put this in our database. And then I do want to look at the opportunity that comes with this new company. And now when we go to sell this new opportunity to Good Buildings, one, we already have a connection with Ron Swanson. And two, we have some information about what they could potentially want to buy. Now, all this is happening without the producers, going out and doing the research and trying to make these inference connections themselves. We're surfacing that for them, which is incredibly helpful. But I like to think of this particular part of IRYS as growing your book from the inside out. So instead of doing something like buying a lead list and hydrating this in here, which we can do, IRYS is assisting users in finding upsell, cross-sell opportunities that they already have at their fingertips. And Linz, I don't know, I think we can go 3 levels deep or 4 levels deep at this point with IRYS.
Yeah, at this point we can go 4 levels deep.
So that means, yeah, go ahead.
It's a really deep connection that you can explore. And every time that you double click on one of these nodes, it recenters the entire diagram around that new selection. So you really get to explore IRYS's universe.
Yeah, or your book. I mean, really, because what they're exploring is their own business, but in a really, really dynamic way and an easy way to see sort of how everybody's interconnected.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's go to opportunity, because that's what everybody on the sales side cares about. So there's some key things to point out here on this screen, right? It looks a lot like, it's a list view screen. It looks a lot like Excel, which is great because a lot of people like to work in this particular view of data. But we do have dynamic KPI cards along the top that I like to point out, because basically what those are again, mini reports that are being run based on the filters or the dynamic settings that you have of each list. So we can filter this list down by open opportunities, closed opportunities. We can get into even looking at date ranges of closing, all kinds of different ways that we can narrow this list down. And then we can, by the way, export this list if we, or, send it via API if we had a connection to, a drip marketing campaign software, et cetera, et cetera. But what I love is that we can see the same data in multiple views. So this is a theme that we have throughout IRYS, which is it doesn't always make sense to see a data set in one way and one way only. So if you're working something through a pipeline, it may make more sense that you want to see this in a board view because we want to take something from gathering data to proposed. So we have that ability here, and that's really depending on the user, how they want to see it. But if we hop into the opportunity itself, this is really where I think the biggest chasm is between a CRM system and an AMS. So typically, this is where you would bridge over. So a salesperson would be working on the front end of this, and then they would, bring in an AE, an AE or a CSR or someone to come in and do the rest of it, which is the insurance-y side, right? But we've married those two things together because our lines of business and our coverage and our limits and class codes and forms, all of that, like this is what we sell. Like this is our product. So it would make sense that even in a CRM type system, you still have product description and you can still specify what it is that we're actually selling to this person or to this company or to this household. And so we do that here. We have the ability to template as well. And Linz, I don't know if it's goes all the way to team templates yet. I know that's in the works.
Yeah, that's in the works. Right now, we set broker level templates. So for the entire tenant themselves. Gotcha.
And then working towards being able to set coverage templates per team. So if you have a commercial team that, sells a particular GL or a BOP or whatever, like you can set those coverage limits and things like that to help reduce keystrokes, which is really nice. But that is all entered here, and it all stays here in the opportunity, and that feeds down the line to submissions. It feeds to policy and invoice and everything else. So once we enter it here, it's never has to be entered again, which is really nice. But if we hop over to participants, again, we're going to see how unique IRYS's structure is here, where, typically in my systems that we used prior, it was like we had, a producer one, maybe producer one, producer two, and maybe a CSR or an AE that we could list in here. What we're saying with IRYS is, especially when it comes to benefits and on the commercial side, there might be a ton of people that are going to participate in getting this opportunity across the line. So what that means is we want to identify within the agency who's working on this opportunity, what their role is. Do they have a production split that could feed into our commission calculations? Is it a completely unrelated company that's a source of business? We can add that here. Maybe we want to track that. So we're really flexible in how we can add participants to an opportunity. Same thing that happens with the insured. We might be working with a ton of different people on the insured side, gathering information for a larger commercial quote or whatnot. And we can identify them and their roles here, and then any additional participants as well. So it's really flexible. And again, it makes sense that we might want to see this in diagram view, especially if this opportunity is requiring a lot of people to take it to market or to bind it. So we're going to able to see that in a diagram here as well. But let's hop into submissions. So one of the big issues I think that happened after COVID, in particular, when everybody kind of dispersed and went remote, was we kind of lost the ability to swivel our chair over to the right and ask somebody like, hey, I've never placed a church before. Do you know where we're going to put this risk? And so what we've done with IRYS is we're using generative AI, and she's giving suggestions to the user right now as to what markets historically this agency that we're looking at has placed these types of risk. So there's two key things here. One, it's, there are weighted. So like more recently placed risks are weighted heavier than, ones that happened 2 years ago, but all of that's being calculated by IRYS and shown to the user here. But we also have the ability at this time to have agency-wide recommendations. And really what this does is it allows the agency to communicate to this user for a risk like this with this profile that we've got a contingency bonus or a commission override or whatever it is that we're working towards. And we want you to know that there's a reason why the agency wants you to place this risk here. Typically, and I know Lindsay and I have commiserated over this before as operators, like this would go out as like an email, and we're all just like crossing our fingers and hoping that people remember to send it to the Hartford, when we know in reality that doesn't always happen. So
that email got buried. Nobody's
looking at it. Or they see it once and then it goes into red and never seen again. But we're allowing the user to, and they can choose these suggestions or not with one click. They don't have to. But if they create one submission, we have the ability to clone multiple. So if you are going to take this to market to many different places, you can do that here, and it's cloning everything from opportunity. So we're not having to key anything in. But in the event that, let's say Chubb, in this particular instance, we did need to change something on the submission itself, we can go in there and do that here. So you'll see everything moved over. All of the coverage and limits that we're looking to place is here for all the lines of business for this risk. I know this is everyone's favorite part, but we have the ability to generate ACORD documents here. So if you are going to send this via email or send ACORDs out for this submission, you can do this right here. And it will generate the 125 in this case, and then all of the ACORDs that submission ACORDs that go along with the lines of business that we've identified. And so we can send them right out of IRYS. And at this time, we have integrations into Microsoft and Gmail. So anything that's sent out of the system is cloned in your inbox there. But we can send this right out here. Or where it gets really exciting is that because we're open API, we have the ability to submit this stuff electronically. And what that means is whether this is going to a carrier's API directly, but maybe it's going through a third party, maybe it's going into a rater, whatever it is, we're able to shoot the information over to that, get the initial response back. And depending on if it's rate quote bind or rate quote, whatever it is, we're able to display to the user, hey, this was sent, this was quoted, this was submitted, it wasn't received, it was error, whatever it is, they're looking at this here. Now we know that multiple lines, like not every line of business is going to have that same process. So maybe we can send something to Chubb via API for a general liability, but EPLI is not available. So we have the ability to individually work these lines of business and send this information electronically, or we can just go through a process which you guys are used to now, which is very manual, and we can fill out the status ourselves if it's happening outside of API.
I think the important part there is the flexibility.
Yeah, and
no matter what it takes,
and the user experience, right? No matter what happens on the back end of the system when we hit submit, the user isn't the one forced to understand that workflow, right? They have a single place, a single focus, regardless of all the crazy stuff we have to do on the back end to make that work.
Right.
Yeah. But again, so once we have multiple submissions in here, we're by line of business. We can see what was accepted or declined. If there's something that's waiting, we have statuses for all of that. But it makes sense, again, that we would look at this in a diagram view, which is what we're doing here. And this is really exciting Linz, I don't know if you want to talk about how we are going to move forward with diagram, but being able to actually add and remove submissions. Yeah.
Our next phase of this is actually not only to be able to view and move these nodes around, but is to actually add new submissions and new lines of business from the diagram itself. So being able to create a new node, a new line of business, and then connect it to each of the markets it needs to belong to directly in the diagram.
And that can apply too for all types of relationships. So whether you're adding a participant or you're just creating a new entity or person related to a household, working on getting that drawn in is really exciting. So
yeah.
Awesome. All right. So let's assume that our very good construction, Ron Swanson, is super pumped with our submissions and wants to go ahead and create some policies here. So we're going to go into creating policies screen, which we use. Again, we spend a lot of time in UX UI design figuring out, how can we do the most work with the least amount of clicks? And here what we're looking at is the create policy button from that opportunity is looking back at all of the submissions and lines of business and telling the user what is available to bind and what isn't, just kind of keeping checks and balances here. But we can go ahead and add policies and we stack them up on the right-hand side, kind of like a shopping cart experience. And so you can create one or many policies with one or many lines of business really fast. Perfect.
I really like the check and balance that we have that says there are no more policies that you need based on the lines of business you had in your opportunity. So
right.
That you know that you're really done. You haven't missed anything.
That's really helpful because, on bigger risk, that gets dicey. Okay, cool. So we bound a policy. This is a live short demo. So I'm not going to get into all the intricacies of billing. This would be a really good spot for us to continue a secondary demo. So if you want to get into how we invoice, how we line item, how we reconcile, definitely hit us up in the chat, and we'll be happy to walk you through that. But we do have a billing component that we can go through. But for now, I think we'll hop into the policy itself and kind of look at how we structure policy. Again, it's very line of business focused. So we might have lines of business within a policy that come in after an effective date or cancel prior to an expiration date. So we're making sure that we're tracking all of that. That is a huge E&O exposure that we found that we wanted to fix in the platform. And then if we hop over to activity, we have the ability to create cases, which is what we're looking at here. Service cases. In this case, we're looking at creating a policy endorsement. And we can see that we have actually tasks related to this parent case. And those tasks can be assigned to multiple people. These kinds of cases can also be customized by tenant. And then also we have the ability to set tasks for a case. So like if you do the same 4 or 5 tasks, or if you want to think of it as a checklist for whatever case this is, we can pre-fill those tasks and pre-assign them to the people that they're supposed to be assigned to. So the user doesn't have to go through that process on their own.
I think a good point here as well, that multiple people can take part in these cases, because we know that, entire teams work on submissions and marketing efforts and renewals and all the things. So, multiple people can take part in this, and also files. You can drop files inside of cases so that everything is in the same place.
Yes, that's really nice. Side note, file storage is necessary. But then you can toggle between, again, looking at cases as like a hierarchical, so you can see the case itself and all the subtasks. Or if you really you've got a lot of tasks in particular on this policy and you just want to see the task that needs to get done, you can look at this in task view as well. Same data, just different view of it. And then we also, everybody loves for E&O, history view. So this is going to capture everything that's happened on this policy, and this activities tab lives on all the screens in our system. And so it's tracking whether something was done by the system, whether it was done by a person, whether it was a case or a task or whatever, invoice, whatever it was. We're tracking that here, and it's all filterable, searchable, which is really nice if you're looking for a particular set of activities that happened on this policy for purposes. All right, so we are back to Very Good Construction's main entity page, and we're looking at the relationships, but I want to hop into proofs here and go through how we would look at certificates of insurance and holders. So again, in our system, a holder is a relationship between a company, right, and Very Good Construction. They're playing the part of holder. And in previous legacy tech, this always was a really hard issue that we couldn't solve. Because sometimes the certificate holder is also an insured, right? Or sometimes the certificate holder is an opportunity. And we had to duplicate that many times in order to represent that. And here we're able to just create that first connection and then move into creating them a certificate of insurance. So we would love to pretend that certs were easy enough that we just hit a button and generate. And hopefully that's how your agencies are run. But mine was construction focused, so it never worked that way. And we always had to go in and, add description of operations, and do a bunch of stuff. So what IRYS is doing here is really simple. It's just saying, here's the fields and here's where they fill in on the ACORD itself. So as we type in the box, you can see the live sort of preview of what the certificate's going to look like. We can add, additional insured and waiver of subrogation information. But what's really cool is as you bind the policy or you create an endorsement, if you add the policy docs at that point, we can actually look at those attachments that are attached to the policy, and we can choose to add them to the COI or not. So for those of us that need to add the actual endorsement onto the COI to send out, they're able to do that here.
And when it's issued, it becomes the second page of the actual PDF that's produced.
Yes, it's all in one.
Going back and having to combine them separately, because that's a nightmare.
Yes. And we can go through and choose what policies. IRYS will automatically choose the lines of the policies that correlate to the 25 in this case. But you can always go back and search for policies in the past if you need to do an audit COI or whatever. You can also add recipients here, one off, without having to generate multiple COIs. So if for some reason somebody needs to see the COI that's not marked on the holder's like template here, you can add them. And then we can also issue the certificate via email. We can send to printer. We can eFax if you have eFax set up, whatever you need to do. But in this case, we'll just shoot an email out. Awesome. Okay, so we'll head back to holders. And the other neat feature here is that the most recent certificate that was issued is on the eyeball. So if you hover over the eyeball or click on it, it'll show you what was most recently sent, which is really, really nice. Okay. All right. Where do we want to hop to next, Linz?
You want to go to the admin panel?
Yeah, we can go to the admin side. So if you have admin access on the back end here of IRYS, we have the ability to customize or technically configure your tenancy. So we can do things like set renewal processes, manage those coverage templates we talked about, create sales goals for your teams, those task checklist inside of cases, set your market predictor, overrides, all of those things. So if you want, we can hop into coverage template. So basically here, the admin here would have the ability to create a coverage template, make it active or inactive. And then we're also like kind of letting them know like how it's being used and giving them the option to add descriptions and things like that. Again, we have KPI cards up here, which is really nice. So we don't, as admins, have to go run a report and see, you know, what's inactive and active. It's kind of right here on the screen. Perfect. Yeah, same thing with setting sales goals. So we can look at creating a goal, who is it assigned to, what's the status of it, where are they at in progress. So a lot of the back end configuration can be done here as well. And this continues to grow, right? As IRYS grows and our customers come on board and they tell us, hey, you know, it'd be really great if, I mean, I guess that's half of Lindsay's entire job. Right? Getting the feedback and understanding where we want to expand customization and configuration.
Yeah, and just to really focus on that feedback from customers is incredibly important to make sure we're listening to how people are using this, because it is so different than anything that we've traditionally used. We want to see how people are interacting with it and building towards new needs that we may not have even thought of.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, to point out here too, you know, if you look at the systems available today, it's very like, two sides, right? There's like, you can't customize anything. It's very rigid, right? It is what it is out of the box. Or you can go get like a low code, no code platform, and then you can customize and configure everything. And it's like, where do you start? And I think Lindsay and I talked a lot about when we built IRYS of giving people that middle ground where, yes, it's customizable, it's configurable, but we still know as a product company where we live, right? And we're not having to do runaway customization projects and getting people so far away from what the product offers that it's impossible to maintain over time. So if anybody listening is in, you know, mid to large agencies that have done a lot of custom building, you know that the building is not as the hardest part, it's the maintenance afterwards. And so we're keeping that line with, you can create this, your own experience within IRYS, but you're still on a product that is maintained by us. Which is helpful. So I think last, you want to hop into the portal, client portal?
Client, yep.
Okay, cool.
Let's do it.
We are here in Beyonce's Knowles client portal. So it's funny. Let's go ahead and log in. But first thing to notice here is that because we have this awesome sort of relational database underpinning everything, this human that we're interacting as, Beyonce, she might have the ability to admin on many different accounts. Maybe she's a property manager or somebody that's in control of compliance, and she might have multiple entities or companies or households that she needs to manage. So we're letting them do that here, and then that will populate the screen. And then at the top, if they need to toggle on to different entities and look at different policies, they can do that as well. But we can hop into, if you want to hop into quotes. Perfect. So just to reiterate, we are the insured's view of IRYS, and it looks very similar to the agent's view, which is really key. That's a lot of I think, discrepancy in other systems as far as what the experience is for the customer versus what it is for the agent or the agency itself. But in this instance, we're looking at quotes, and they can go in and look at where you, if you have quotes outstanding, where you're looking at placing them, kind of what the status is. And Linz, I don't know if you want to get into a little bit about how on the agency side we can customize the view of this data. I know we do it for documents, but
yes, absolutely. So tenants have the ability to customize the level of data that they want their users to actually see. In this case, we have quotes for different markets, and they can see where their lines of business were quoted or declined, and then the total amount of premium that was quoted. For everything that you see in the consumer portal, you as an agency have the ability to decide what level of information that your customers get to see.
And we're treating them kind of like each individual insured in this case is kind of like getting its own security permission sets, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, let's hop over to, I think we can see in this view too, we can see policies. And so again, they're seeing any active or inactive policies. If they have a lot, we've had a lot of business with them, they can go through and search and filter just like we have the ability to do. It's giving them their KPI cards at the top as well, so they don't have to do their own calculations, which is really nice. Same thing with holders here. So Linz, I don't know if you want to describe a little bit about sort of how we manage holders and what happens when they want to change holders or request certs.
So from a tenant perspective, all of this can be customized just like it could in the other views. They can allow consumers to come in and grab copies of certificates that have already been issued if they just need to get another copy of one that you've already worked on for them. They can create a brand spanking new one for themselves. It just will not allow them to add anything in the description of operations section at this point in time to protect everybody from E&O issues. And then I'm sure we'll have more customization on that side moving forward as well.
Yeah, and I think from here they can, if they wanted to request a cert, they can do that through service request, which actually we'll click on in a second.
We certainly can.
So if you go to, we can click into assets too. So we have the ability again, because we're the AMS and we don't need separate software to do all of this. We can have them manage their own vehicle tools, equipment, locations, all of that under our assets tab. So they can look at what's already been entered if we were doing the entering for them, or they can add their own. And then if they do need to do something like update driver's list or vehicles, and they wanted to do that here on our end, it would create a service request for the agent to review. So we're not going to let them commit data to the database without some oversight, because typically if you're going to be changing schedules, you want to make sure that's endorsed on the policy.
And just like we saw on the policy side of things, we had that audit trail. This also contributes to that audit trail. So as users are making changes, consumers themselves, you can also see that those are being captured in this space. So we can always tell exactly who has changed what at what point in time.
Awesome. And I think documents, the same thing. Like we have a list of all the documents, whatever we have, files we have attached to this particular entity on the agency side, there's a toggle on there that says, do you want to let this be visible to the insured in the portal? And so they can control that as well. And then service request here, just being able to look at any outstanding requests that they have and the status of it and who's working on it, and then also request a new one. But then they can also look at history. So this is kind of gets into, I think, where Lindsay and I's brain is future moving, which would be looking at things like stewardship reports and like, what have we done for you this year? This is kind of the beginnings of that. Awesome. Well, we've come to the end of the LinkedIn Live demo. Now we're going to have a couple minutes here where we're going to look through the questions that were asked during the demo, and we're going to be here to answer some of those as they came in.
All right. Well, thank you for going through the demo for us. We've got a lot of action and a lot of questions. Some we were able to respond to like tippy-tapping during, but I also want to, like my old teacher heart says, that if someone has a question, everybody has a question. So I also want to make sure that we address some of them on air. And again, keep questions coming in as you're going along here. I'm going to start off with Amber, because Amber is one of the people I didn't get to respond to via the comments. And she wants to talk about supporting generating of proposals. So I think, Lindsay, since it's a product question, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Absolutely. So for our first version that's out now, it is not part of our first version, but it is coming on our roadmap in 2024. Proposals are incredibly complex, as you guys know, for anybody that generates them today. And we are currently working with partners so that we have a really good, solid solution that allows kind of more than just the traditional template that we've all been used to working with.
And that's an important distinction too, because like, I think some of the downfalls of previous software companies is they try to do all the things, right? And so if you try to build natively all of the things, and especially in a system like IRYS or like an insurance management system, you kind of become like meh at all of them. And so we spent a lot of time figuring out like, where do we need to partner versus where do we really need to like beef up the insurance side? And so DocGen is one of those where in some cases like COI, we're doing that natively, and then like proposal generation would be something that we would want to partner with on that.
And just to like keep things spicy in between the questions, I wanted to throw up some of the other comments that we were hearing of people who are
loving
it. Another one of the questions that we haven't touched on is from Lisa, talking a little bit more about kind of how IRYS's capabilities can expand beyond the agency, and how are you thinking about this kind of going across the insurance industry with like those dynamic relationship capabilities?
Yeah, this is huge for us for 2024, is uncoupling and making sure we have like that microservice base where we can offer something like the dynamic relationship modeling or the generative AI, to larger agencies or even carriers and even in the reinsurance market to look at things like dynamic underwriting data. Because as agents, we often don't get looped into the underwriting conversation, but especially on the commercial side, we're doing a lot. We're gathering a lot of that preliminary data. And it's useful. It's useful not just for us to make money from, but also for underwriting partners and just looking at the risk holistically. And so we've already entered into some of those discussions with larger carriers about how we can actually take what is useful for an agency and make sure it's purposeful for them as well.
There's a couple of questions from Caleb. He asked about the ACORD integration earlier in the chat, so I wanted to draw attention to that. But then he was also wanting to kind of tap into what are some of the most common integrations or integration requests that you guys are getting.
Yeah, I can go through some, and I'm sure, Lindsay, you have a list too. But so on the front end, again, not trying to be, a master of all things, there's going to be a lot of marketing. So if you think of things like drip campaign marketing or SEO tracking on websites, like that is a common place that we integrate. So being able to bridge over, a cold lead list or an audience list that we're creating that then you can send over to a HubSpot or a MailChimp or Constant Contact or whatever you're using at the time. That's a really common place for integration. Premium finance is another one. So we are working with Ascend at the moment to be able to send via API, which is really exciting, all of the information about a potential premium finance contract, and then also receive that information back. So that is a big one that's super time consuming, that saves a lot of clicks. And then we have standard stuff like DocGen, like we've talked about, web form integrations, like being able to do like Gravity Forms and FormStack from your website so that you can gather things there and push that right to the CRM and AMS that we have. On the back end, Linz, can you think of any?
I think just Zapier, knowing that we can connect through Zapier, we have those connections already built. So it makes it very easy for you to connect things that you already have in place.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing, but also really important, would be direct carrier connections.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just really drive home that point that Lindsay just mentioned of the open API framework, because I think that that's something that's a little unique in the market, and that's where I'm going to leave it. It's just really put that little cherry on top of it. I again, I told you I'm going to sprinkle in some of these comments to keep the good vibes going. Vincent's thinking about replacing his stone tablets, so that's good news. And then actually, this question was asked earlier in the chat and then brought up again here. So while we responded to it in writing, I wanted to just bring it up. So like emailing outside of the system, what does that look like in current state?
Lindsay, I'll let you take that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So today it is drag and drop. So from either Gmail or Outlook, drag and drop into IRYS, super easy. And then our next phase of email integration is actually a tighter integration where there will be some like pre-assignment, pre-attaching to those accounts and contacts as well to kind of help you through that process.
Another integration question for you guys is more on the accounting side. So I wanted to bring this one up because I don't think we touched on that when we were talking through integrations just a minute ago.
So for accounting is always like a hot button topic. It's so random because insurance accounting is like the least sexy thing that you can talk about. But there really are two schools, right? Do you have a full general ledger that's embedded in the software, or do you stop it really at what I consider it was just like commission calculation and things like that? Right now we have the concept of transactions, which would be line items. We can do invoicing. We do commission reconciliation and commission calculations, right? That is where IRYS ends today. And so the two most common integration requests that we have are QuickBooks and what's the other one? NetSuite. Yeah. And so both of those are in the works at the moment with current implementations and will be available if you do decide to break out your general ledger. We are looking at general ledger capabilities in 24 though. Yeah, great. We're all going to cry when we have to.
We've got another question from Carrie about like, will you be given or do agents need to use SIC codes, or is there an option to not enter them?
Take that one, Lindsay.
SIC codes are not a requirement, no. There's lots of things in other systems that we're kind of forced into in order to use aspects of it. We try to maintain a level of flexibility because we know that every agency works differently. And so not try and force you into things that you don't want to be doing.
One quick plug I do want to make, I was trying to bring it up on the screen for everybody to see, and unfortunately, the LinkedIn's being buggy on me today. I did put a link to subscribe to IRYS's newsletter into the comments. So make sure for anybody that wants to stay in the know and kind of up to date on what's happening with IRYS to subscribe to that. And going back to what Margot said during the demo, I know I saw at least one comment come in that there are people that are interested in learning more. Throw a comment into the chat that you want to learn more, and we'll have our team follow up with you and make sure that you get what you need, questions answered, because I see that we are, that 45-minute time frame is a long one for people for demos on LinkedIn. But we do have a couple more questions to keep going. So there is from Chris, and this is a big one, Chris. This is a lot of reading for me to do here. But email or other digital delivery policy information, opt-in, opt-out regulations. Those. Okay, I'll let you answer, Marco.
Yeah, I'll let Lindsay go. But yes, we definitely considered that one, especially building out like how we were going to curate audiences and lists and how we can actually represent the human across many. So Lindsay's shaking her head because we've had this discussion so many times. Like, if a person is in a system as an insured or a driver, right, and they're in multiple times as a contact, then that opt-in, opt-out really gets lost, right? Because unless you have that on every version of that contact in your system, it's hard to govern it. So because we were able to shrink everything down and say like this person has opted in or out, right? We have the ability to really adhere to this, but I'll let you finish the rest of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we basically capture the ability to, collect that response on each persona that you have for each of those individuals.
I've got a ace in a Santa hat there that heard my plea for a different comment to show the link. So there you go. There's the link. It's in the chat now. I've got these helpers all around. Basically, I'm the Santa Claus here. Okay, we've got another question too from Alex, diving specifically into an IVANS integration. If you guys could speak to what that looks like.
Yes, we are working on the IVANS integration. It's not live yet, but it's actually we did a lot of thinking around this because IRYS is a very small part of moving data in and out of a system, right? So it's not the only time that you would want to push data in. So Lindsay and I went back to the drawing board and said, like, if we hadn't spent 20 years doing this one, workflow with IRYS, like what does a data management tool look like on top of an AMS? And so not only does it manage things coming from IRYS or eBix or Progressive or name your download engine, but it can also manage data coming in from those third-party data sources we talked about, and like really giving the user like that suspense so that they can keep the data integrity like where it needs to be, but then also understand where the data is coming from, because with the best use case of IRYS, you're using multiple third parties, right? To do any of that integration work that we were just talking about. We want a history and an audit trail of all of those things, not just an IRYS download audit trail. So it's bigger than IRYS, but yes, that's the answer. Yeah.
I think we may have gotten to every question that we had either in writing or here on the live. Again, I want to preface, raise your little hand in the comments if you'd like to learn more, and we will follow up with you. And also, again, to subscribe to that newsletter. I had to do one last feel-good moment here. And to subscribe to the newsletter if you'd like to stay up to date on everything that's going on in the world of IRYS. We're putting out agency educational content via that newsletter, as well as things like product updates. And the last assignment, if you're not already, make sure that you follow IRYS on LinkedIn, because we're also constantly putting out content there. And we're likely going to be doing more of these types of discussions and demos here on LinkedIn as well. So if you like what you saw, let us know in the comments. That helps with the excitement around these events moving forward. But Lindsay and Margot, thank you so much for driving us through the demo, and everybody for your questions and interaction throughout. And have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.